Plan International Indonesia, and we do have Sylvia from University of North Carolina as well. She'll be sharing some exciting insights from the field, and either she's worked in the sector for some time before choosing to come and do a PhD with us. And then we have Rhea from Habitat for Humanity International. She'll be sharing some exciting insights from the work they do globally and how they have community leadership for inclusiveness when they talk about climate resilience, rural WaSH. So one of the things we want you to do for us, we want to start by running this quick survey. It has got some kind of questions. We'd love you to really scan and complete that for us as we dive through this session. Of course, as the session goes on, we'll still bring it back again towards the end to make sure that, you've done it. So, and we'll have Sylvia share some of the results midway to let you know how we're actually doing in terms of responses and what are we learning from this session. So I'll start by setting the stage myself, and I'll be talking about community leadership for inclusiveness. One important word here is inclusiveness to climate resilience rural WaSH. What we're trying to focus for, or what we're trying to emphasize, is we need to think about inclusiveness, but we may need to have community leadership to achieve that. So that's the main kind of thing that we need to really push for. And I'll start by really, trying to define climate resilience WaSH. What is this? How do we understand this? So when you talk about WaSH services, these are those that we look at that they anticipate, they respond, they cope with, they recover from, and adopt. But adopt from what? They adopt from the climate-related shocks and stresses. So every time we talk about, climate resilience, these are the ones we are referring to that could help us to recover from that or adapt to that. And in most cases, whenever we talk about having this resilience, we're trying to talk about how do we minimize the negative impacts on the environment. So that's when we talk about this. Another important thing is to see how we can prioritize the most exposed, vulnerable population. And the community leadership is helpful in helping us identify these and work to see how we can protect these vulnerable people in this kind of situation. So I'm showing a conceptual framework here, which I'm trying to really explain to you what resilience is. What do we mean when we talk about climate resilience in here? So when you look at this conceptual framework, we have two things first, the shock, the stresses. And this happens every time we talk about climate change. And when you come to the next one, we have vulnerability, which comes in here. And this comes in when we have the exposure, the sensitivity, and also have adaptive kind of capacity. So this is what we really have to push for. So we need to know that most of WaSH infrastructure, WaSH services are vulnerable to climate change. And we need to think about how we make them resilient. And for them to actually try to achieve this, we need to think about the reforms, recover. Sometimes when this happens, we need to worry about they usually recover better than they were before this happened, or even worse than how they were before the climate shocks or stresses happened. But then what we're trying to bring forward is to think about resilience. When you talk about resilience, you want to bring forward two things. One, you want to look at decreasing vulnerability, and we try to see how do we decrease the vulnerability of some of these services, and also increase capacity and improved choices of opportunities when we talk about this. So let me dive into climate change and WaSH and try to look into that in detail. Every time we talk about climate change, we are worried about what happens to the existing systems. And we see these vulnerabilities coming from all these floods, droughts, sea levels, and so on. But whenever you have this, we've been doing some work in the Philippines, and we are talking about the typhoons and seeing how to improve the WaSH services and WaSH infrastructure to the typhoon. So all of these are kind of things that we have to worry about when we talk about climate change. The other one we can know that sometimes when you have climate change, it can actually result into too little water. So it doesn't have to be one side that we're going to have too much water to have cause impact. But even too little water has got a problem that we should worry about. And when we talk about these, we are trying to look at the different aspects that come handy. And one of them, you think about the decline in water supply, you think about the water use conflicts, and a lot of things that are actually happening every time we talk about this. To take humor, let's think about the too much water. What happens when we have too much water? So we've now moved from the too little to the too much. So we need to make sure the WaSH services we're talking about can actually be resilient to all these climate changes. So here when we talk about the too much water, you probably think about increased rainfall and flooding. And this has got an impact on different infrastructure and services. I've been talking about what happened in the Philippines where we do work. The kind of increased contamination that comes through. The other one is this can result in increase of temperature, and this can also lead to greater transmission of diseases, and a lot of work is going on that. But today, I'm only told to moderate. So I want to summarize by saying two things to kickstart the entire presentations for today. One, the risks are global, but I'll tell you, resilience action is supposed to be local. Most times people think because it's kind of thing they want to move things from whatever and they say they should work. That's why things fail in a short time. We need to think about resilience should be a local action. You need communities to put together. You need to think with them, identify the problem, think with them the interventions to make sure this happens. And it's important to act now. So it's great that everyone should start acting now and see how we have all these communities together. So when they're together, you need to identify, manage, and minimize climate risks to WaSH. But also think about climate resilience requires a focus on minimizing exposures to the shocks, strengthening WaSH services, which is very important, and strengthening the capacity of the government and communities, as it's been said in this conference throughout. So now to summarize and invite our great presenters, I want to let you know that community leadership at the center of climate resilient action, we need to think about the rural context we are working in. And we have to know that the community leadership shapes the WaSH resilience. They are very key in shaping some of these. And case studies from diverse regions and contexts, we're going to actually listen to them. We're going to have people talk to us from Indonesia. We're going to hear people talk to us from Philippines, from Africa, on how they have really worked into this. And the key question I want to leave with you, what does it take for communities to sustain inclusive, resilient WaSH systems? I'll leave that with you and think about it as we go deep into this session. To open up today's side event, I want to open up this by inviting the president of Outreach International, Dr. Eileen, to come and talk to us about community-led climate resilience in the Philippines. Eileen, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I just moved to the next slide, I believe. There we go. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful opportunity to be here with all of you and just to learn the passion that I've always known is there for WaSH, but just to experience it firsthand here during this WaSH conference. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the social systems that is required for WaSH interventions to be successful. I want us to think through and think beyond the technologies. We've heard so much about technologies, WaSH technologies to improve our systems. I want us to think a little bit beyond the actual infrastructure to consider what social infrastructure we need to be both proactive, but then also reactive when it comes to adaptive capabilities and having those in place. And before I start off, I do want to acknowledge that the true work is done by the practitioners in the spaces where we work, especially for Outreach International. And the real champions are the community leaders and the community members that are in these realities, and they are leading the charge. And I am just so honored to present them here this afternoon. Now, at Outreach, we work in 7 international locations across the world. We support communities and people to bring sustainable solutions to their own challenges. And we know from our 30 years of experience that when you place people at the center of development, it's not only more effective and it's not only more impactful, but it's also sustainable in the long run. So said differently, when people have ownership over the processes and over their development trajectory, whether that's water, sanitation, hygiene, the impact will be sustainable. And we've seen that also in our work. But as we also heard, and Musa also brought that up for us, such situations also link us to climate-linked disasters, and that we need to be also very, very much linked into those and know what they are coming. And we see a lot of those situations in the Philippines, which is one of the locations where we support communities. But I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to have a local community leader, grassroots leader out of the Philippines, share a little bit more about what that looks like in their situation.
Ako po si Rainer Danao, taga Capacualan, Milagros, probinsya ng Masbate, presidente ng Samahan ng Pagsulong at Pagunlad ng Capacualan. Ang epekto po sa amin sa pagbabago ng klima ay tulad nitong nakaraan na malakas na bagyo na halos lahat ng tahanan ay nagiba. Naapektuhan ang mga hanapbuhay, lalo ng pangingisda, dahil lahat ng mga sasakyang pandagat ay nawasak. Walang komunikasyon, walang tubig, wala ring kuryente, kaya lahat ng komunidad ay apektado.
Every year in the Philippines, there's a new record when it comes to storms, when it comes to typhoons, when it comes to flooding. And just this past September, a couple of weeks ago, another typhoon hit the island of Masbate, where Rainier is based. And in a matter of hours, 150,000 people on that small island were displaced. And it racked up about $8 million worth of dollars in damages, the typhoon itself. And it goes without saying, people were left without access to basic services, water, sanitation, and the works. Now, how can we start to address that issue and that problem? And, you know, as you can see, the impact there being tremendous. And I want to make a bold statement here, and I want to say that if we do not focus on empowering local communities and local leadership toward more efficient local action, then all the efforts that we are putting toward better infrastructure, better technologies will not be as impactful as it can be. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear what another practitioner out of the Philippines has to share with us on that.
Hi, my name is Nancy Bobadilla from the Philippines, and I've been a community development practitioner of Outreach Philippines for more than 25 years. In our development work, we practice community-led development because we believe that it must be incorporated in our programming in order to strengthen the resiliency of poor communities against climate change. Let me emphasize that one of the primary outcomes of CLD is the establishment of an organized community. It is crucial for at least 3 reasons. First, an organized community responds more quickly and effectively to the impact of climate change, especially here in the Philippines because we are very much vulnerable to natural disasters like typhoon, flooding, and earthquakes. When people are organized, they quickly think of solutions to their situation. They plan and act together to address at least the immediate needs of the most affected before, during, and after the disaster. Second, an organized community promotes cooperation and mutual help. People voluntarily share their labor, resources, ideas, and their time to address various issues and needs. And third, an organized community knows how to manage solutions to their issues. It is usually the poor who experience and feel the impact of climate change. Hence, they know best what solutions are appropriate for their situation. They are not just recipients of assistance, they also are involved in identifying or creating solutions and in implementing them.
Okay, so let me exemplify a little bit what Nancy was talking about, and I'm going to go back to Rainier's community, who you met earlier. And they are just one example of the many areas where we do community organizing and then empower communities to both be ready for when something happens to them and then also be ready to react accordingly. They are a coastal community in Masbate, as I shared before, and therefore very vulnerable to climate change. But through our process, they have become organized in 2021. They have since implemented various WaSH initiatives by themselves, developed by themselves, and now managed also by themselves. And they have at this point also gained access through support from the government to ensure that their projects remain sustainable. And they've been very, very successful in doing all of that. And they've done all of those activities without true external interventions from our side, other than supporting them in the process of Become Stronger. Let's hear directly from Rainier again what that has led to and what happens when they are organized.
Kami ay matatag na sa mga dumarating na kalamidad. Nakapag-release po kami ng aming rice loan at sinisigurado namin na paglipas ng bagyo ay mayroong kami makakain. Pagkatapos po ng bagyo, agad naming minonitor ang aming water system at kinumpuni ang mga nasirang tubo. At dahil solar powered water system ang aming gamit, naggawa kami ng mga extension cord para makapag-charge ang mga residente ng Lebre para ma-access nila ang kanilang mga pamilya.
Okay, let me leave you with three things this afternoon. And before I start with those three things, I want to add the following too. Community organizing is a low-cost, yet a high-impact approach to becoming resilient. And it's a very straightforward kind of approach, right? That it's a technology in itself, but it doesn't require a long-term big infrastructure, and we can do it. We all can do it. Let me leave you with three things to take away from this session. I want to encourage you to incorporate community-led practices into your programming. What does that involve? And Musa also referred to it earlier. It involves capacity building at a local level. It involves consciousness raising around the importance of being organized and being able to act collectively on your issues. And in our case, it's a 5-year investment. So when we start organizing in a particular location, we remain in that space for 5 years because it takes time. It's not an easy, straightforward thing to do. But when you do it right, the impact is enormous. Communities like Rainier's communities, they are internally motivated to do this kind of work, and they are now also supporting their neighboring communities in a very, very organic way. Second, we need practitioners that are trained in community-led facilitation. They need to understand that local ownership is key, and they need to facilitate toward that. Top-down forms of facilitation does not work. In fact, that's not even facilitation, right? That's directive setting. And then last, it is crucial for these practices to be inclusive and democratic. Okay, I'm going to leave you with one last message from Rainier.
Payo ko po sa ibang komunidad, magkaroon sila ng samahan para sama-sama nilang matukoy at ang kanilang mga problema at madali nilang ma-access ang solusyon ng kanilang problema.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eileen, for that igniting presentation. As I promised, we're only going to have very brief kind of talks from different people, so we can go into the most interesting ones. So right now we want to go to Indonesia, and one of our colleagues couldn't make it here in person. So she chose to record this and send it to us, but she's online, so if you have tough questions, they'll just go direct to her. So
My name is Novika Nurdianti from Yayasan Plan International Indonesia. Thank you for allowing me to share about Plan Indonesia's approach to promoting community leadership in climate resilient WaSH based on best practices from the Water for Women project. We all know that climate change has already happened. Climate hazard escalating was risk threaten water quantity, quality, infrastructure integrity, and was behavior change. Study from Bappenas or National Development Planning Agency in 2020 found that climate hazard risk reducing open defecation progress and sanitation access. Climate change also affects different parts of community in various ways. In many situations, climate change impact on was more likely to disproportionately affect for women and people with disability. Intensive risks are faced by women with higher workload, low-income households with lower coping capacity, and people with disability encountering persistent access barriers. Unfortunately, based on the baseline project Plan Indonesia in 2023, there is lack of participation of marginalized groups in WaSH and climate change development. Plan Indonesia promotes community leadership for inclusive climate resilient WaSH to address this situation through capacity building for stakeholders in WaSH working group, disabled people organization, and women organization on climate resilient WaSH GETSI to strengthen their knowledge, skill, and system about climate resilient WaSH GETSI. And after that, Plan Indonesia conducted a participatory climate resilient GETSI WaSH workshop facilitated by the Train WaSH working group, disabled people organization, and women organization. Following the workshop, the community to oversee the action plan, ensuring it is allocated within the village fund and present needs at the district level for village fund advocacy. In addition, policy advocacy is also carried to ensure the sustainability of this program. And after and during the implementation of the climate action plan, monitoring and evaluation will carry out which is also involve the WaSH working group, including disabled people organization and women organization. So if we talk about the participatory climate resilient GETSI WaSH workshop, in this workshop, the community mapped out potential climate hazard, analyzing the impact of climate change on GETSI and WaSH, and mapping local resources to develop GETSI and climate resilient WaSH action plan. This workshop involved diverse groups such as men, women, youth, the elderly, people with disability, and village government. The 5-pillar STBM, such as stop open defecation, hand washing with soap, safe drinking water and food handling, household solid waste management, and household liquid waste management, serve as a basic framework, ensuring that community-level action related to water sanitation and hygiene are integrated into broader climate resilience strategies. After 2 years of the project, monitoring results showed changes in WaSH facility at both the household and public levels, an increase in village budget allocation, and several activities implemented to respond to climate change issues. Out of 1,291 households surveyed across 12 villages, 17.6% had WaSH facilities resilient to climate-related disaster, and 16.6% had climate resilient and inclusive facilities. Of the 91 surveyed villages, 31.9% had climate resilient WaSH facilities, and 27.5% had climate resilient and inclusive facilities. We identified several modifications observed included water storage, boreholes, pipeline, elevated toilet, reinforced septic tank, additional protection for toilet, waste sorting and storage, closed trash bin, regular waste collection system, backup and hand washing facilities, facility height adjustment, redirecting wastewater to closed channel. Furthermore, there was also a village fund allocation to respond to both adaptation and mitigation efforts against the impact of climate change. Reforestation as community intervention provides more stable access to water and protection from the impact of climate change. They will be supporting the achievement of resilient WaSH. From this approach, Plan Indonesia learned that the Climate Resilient WaSH GETC workshop mobilized community action by turning local resources into concrete action plan that reduce vulnerability and strengthen village resilience. The second one, locally adapted infrastructure and knowledge help community withstand climate hazard while empowering vulnerable groups and in reinforcing social support system. And the third one, programs such as STBMGC or WaSH GETC and IWRM provide the foundation for climate change resilient WaSH by building local capacity, promoting inclusivity, and using regulatory and funding mechanisms to scale impact in high-risk area. And the last one, inclusive access to water sanitation facilities, enhance resilience, especially for people with disability, the elderly, and also children. For the next, let us watch together a testimonial video from community members and stakeholders involved in climate resilient WaSH GETC program.
Untuk mewujudkan pembangunan WaSH yang berketahanan iklim, berkesetaraan gender, dan inklusi sosial, organisasi disabilitas tidak bisa bekerja sendiri. Dengan bermitra, dapat memperkuat proses advokasi dan sistem keberlanjutan WaSH.
Bicara tentang STBMGC ini adalah hal dasar yang harus semua orang tahu. Sehingga di fasilitas umum seperti di kantor, seperti di rumah sakit, ataupun di puskesmas, sanitasi yang kita buat itu, orang disabilitas dan non-disabilitas bisa mengakses itu dengan baik.
Pada umumnya, di tingkat pemerintah desa, rencana aksi yang dilakukan intervensi anggaran jamban inklusif untuk penyandang disabilitas, penghijauan di area mata air dan di daerah rawan longsor, modifikasi jamban yang inklusif di kantor desa.
Hasil dari monitoring yang teman-teman plan datang itu, bagaimana manfaatnya ketika ada pegangan di pintu masuk, bagaimana ada handle itu di kamar mandi, dan waktu Om Sebinus datang memang dia coba itu handle yang depan pintu masuk, menurut dia ini luar biasa, dia bilang. Karena terus terang kami juga terpicu karena plan.
Di sekolah kami juga disediakan 6 WC, yaitu 4 WC laki-laki dan 2 WC perempuan. Ada juga disediakan WC inklusif untuk anak-anak yang menyandang disabilitas.
Sarana sanitasi, ya ini kebetulan baru saya sendiri, dari jalannya sampai masalah pegangan.
Program-program yang terkait STBMGC yang berketahanan iklim, itu salah satunya penanaman pohon di Reget itu pada tahun 2023.
Kita tetap terlibat untuk penanaman mangrove di Labu Kuris, di Alas, tetap terlibat teman-teman disabilitas. Waktu bulan kemarin juga kami terlibat di sana. Memang mangrove itu kan banyak manfaatnya, Mas.
Karena saya setelah didampingi dari Plan dan Persani, saya berharap mampu menginspirasi masyarakat luas bahwa keterbatasan bukan halangan untuk kita bermanfaat untuk lingkungan ini juga.
I will close the session with a quote from Joanna Mott, Getty Specialist at Water Performance Fund.
Okay. Thanks for that great presentation.
From Yayasan Plan.
We're going to move to changing gears now. We've had a lot about community leadership for inclusive climate resilience WaSH, but all that requires having resources that they can use. So we're going to have Slivia talk to us about or unpacking the pathways to water and sanitation climate resilience village budgets in Indonesia. How is this happened? Floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Musa. Good afternoon, everyone. So excited to share with you all and hope also to learn from others about how we unpack climate resilient budget, especially at local level, as Dr. Musa has reminded us, the impact of climate resilient climate hazard is experienced by people at the local level. And oftentimes we are limited in how to help them. And as Dr. Musa also mentioned before, we know it is important. We know climate hazard happen, but where do we get the funding? And this morning plenary, we also learned we need a lot of money. It's predicted that 28.4 billion is needed each year for the entire world to get into SDGs. But this number doesn't include climate hazard, so it will be more. And we talk about private financing, but the fact is currently only around 9% is from private sector. Majority of the funding comes from public sector, from government. But the research in decentralized context, where funding is also transferred to the local level, is limited, especially when we talk at the village level. There is a limited evidence on how this budget's getting allocated. So we go to Indonesia with partnership with Plan International Indonesia, advised by Dr. Musa, to understand this pathway of funding allocation. In Indonesia, national government transferred their funding to village level between 2015 to 2023, around $4.6 billion. But fundings that local government allocate for WaSH resilient infrastructure is still limited. And through collaboration with Plan Indonesia, we're able to explore the reasons behind that. In the literature, we were able to unpack some factors that influencing budget allocation at the local level, such as perceived risk, how local government think they're able to do adaptive activities, their adaptive capacity, how their mandate to implement budget specifically for WaSH resilient based on national or district government regulation. And we all know politics matter, so political incentive plays a role there. And community advocacy, where we all often work on helping and support our community to advocate better for their rights, water and sanitation rights. And in this presentation today, we want to understand more how local government in Indonesia allocate their village fund for water infrastructure resilient funding, such as tanks, pipeline, boreholes, raised well rims, and routine maintenance, and also for sanitation infrastructure, such as septic tank reinforcement, routine upkeep, and also accessibility upgrades. we localized these variables that we found in the literature to the local context in Indonesia, where adaptive capacity means perceived ability and duty by the village leaders to mobilize resources after a disaster. And community advocacy is how grassroots NGO, youth, local leaders, they can engage to champion WaSH resilient budget, and how political incentive, such as how campaign promises from village leaders connect with citizen complaint, and also how it influenced their electoral support. And then regulatory mandate is about policies at national to district level that influence local government decision, and how they perceive the risks from different climate hazards that happen in their village influence their decision to WaSH financing. Existing research usually just look this in variable by variable, but in this, now we want to see how they're all connected together. And we did survey, but oftentimes it's not enough, so we also talk with local leaders to explain our survey result. And this is the statistical method we did. I'm not going to explain it. And this is the result. Interestingly, we see, although there is regulatory mandate from national government, from district government, it influences the adaptive capacity. So when there is regulation for local government to implement WaSH funding, WaSH resilient funding, they do feel like they can. They do feel like they should. And when disaster increase, they also feel like the adaptive capacity, meaning they feel they could, they feel they're able to do it and they should do it. But the red lines show that they don't really directly translate. Local government that present here can later on explain why, but we also acknowledge the limitation of the study. We only survey around 207 participants, and that's also why sometimes we get low statistical significance. But this is an interesting finding that we can all discuss together. The only pathway that continuously significantly influence one another is from community advocacy. So it matters when we support community to advocate, that influence political incentive, then later on translate to funding for water and sanitation. And interestingly, the way I draw the pathways here, community advocacy has the thickness like path. Our model show that it shares the highest variant in our model, meaning that it helps explain the model. This is the variable that help explain the model to the funding allocation. So it means although the effect size is lower, but it matters a lot. So we conclude from our survey that political incentives are the immediate budget trigger. And risks and rules build capacity at local level, but they're not always translate to funding. But interestingly, when community voice their rights to water and sanitation, it has powerful impact when it aligns with local government incentive politically. And to unpack more about this, my colleague from Indonesia will explain more about the result from our focus group discussion.
Good morning from Indonesia and good afternoon in Chapel Hill. I'm Farunisa, a researcher in rural sociology from Sumbawa University of Technology, Indonesia. To validate and deepen our survey result, we conducted focus group discussion with 7 selected respondents. We present the survey findings through different pathway of influence and ask target questions to explain the observed patterns. Our study highlights 3 key findings. First, why do regulation and increased disaster not lead to higher adaptation budget in village? We found that program implementation still depends heavily on village leader vision and mission. Village funds are less flexible than expanded. Around 40% is state to district program, leaving only 60% under village discretion. Moreover, WaSH is viewed as a basic need, not as a long-term climate investment. Regulation therefore acts mainly as enabler, providing legitimacy but not strong budget incentive. Second, political incentives are the main drivers of climate-resilient WaSH spending. Village leaders often link political promise to citizen urgent needs. Cleanliness and healthy programs become visible symbols of political legitimacy. For example, a village head vision of a clean, orderly, and healthy community directly shape WaSH priorities and budgets. Consistency with higher level plans from village to national also provides a normative framework for using village fund for WaSH. However, while political incentives open the door for action, sustaining this program depends on the strength of village institutions. Third, community advocacy plays a critical balancing role. Training programs such as community-based total sanitation or STBM, including those supported by Plan Indonesia, form a foundation for local policy. Community aspiration expressed through neighbor meetings and village forums can be translated into development and budget plans. Advocacy also helps village governments access funding from higher levels, promotes collective action or gotong royong, and strengthens program sustainability. Together, these insights reveal how regulation, risk leadership vision, political incentive, and community advocacy interact to shape local climate adaptation funding decisions in Indonesia. Thank you.
So before I end, we all agree that politics cannot be ignored, but when advocacy from local community align with political incentive, it's more likely to move funding. And when local government have more freedom to fulfill the request from their community, it's more likely for them to also invest in requests related towards climate resilient WaSH activities. And as a researcher, we would like to understand more why adaptive capacity don't necessarily translate to budget. And maybe there are more pathways need to be explored that can help move forward the budget allocation in this important sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that great presentation. I think we're going to summarize the talks by having Rhea from Habitat give us solutions. We've talked about resilience, community involvement, budgeting. What's so hard? So let's get solutions from Rhea to tell us what should the solutions be.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name again is Rhea Gary Trish, and I'm here with my colleagues, Charlotte Wellsby and John Akudago, and I'm going to talk quickly about community-led, climate-resilient rural WaSH solutions in Habitat. Our vision is we want to see a place where everyone has a decent place to live. So what does that mean? Usually when you think about Habitat, you think about housing. Well, every house needs somewhere where you can go to the bathroom. Every house needs some type of sanitation solution, whether that's at the household level or whether that's at the community level. And that is the reason why Habitat for Humanity works in the WaSH sector. Oops. Oh, I don't know what happened. Let's see. Okay, great. As all my colleagues prior to me stated, we work in the community as well. So one of the first things that we do is we go into community. We don't just start to work, but we need to find out what is currently going on in that community. How have they been able to, as the community, respond to floods, to droughts, to fires, previous things that have happened in their particular communities? What has been the response from the community level? What has been the response from the municipality level? What other NGOs actually exist in that particular community that also respond, so that whatever solutions that we come to, we have all come to those working together to develop those particular solutions. So how do we do that? First of all, we do our own homework, we do our research, and we figure out what has already transpired. We get to understand all about the demographics of the community, the background of the community. Do they have already existing community building organizations? Because there's no reason to go in and start another one when you can actually work with who already exists and who's already working together already. We look at their weather conditions, et cetera, et cetera. And then the final thing that we do is that we work with the community. The community actually leads us. And how does that happen? We do one-on-one interviews. We do focus groups. We sit down with all the sectors of the communities. We learn how have they responded in the past and what are the gaps, whether those be technological, but they can also be, what are the training gaps? What other information do they need to have in order to prepare for what is inevitable, which could be a flood or can be drought? And so that is how we prepare and how we come to the solutions that we have in community. So what I'm going to share with you today are 3 different solutions from communities that we work in around the world. Now, currently we work outside of the US in 70 countries, and of those 70 countries, we work in 40 communities around water, sanitation, and hygiene. So I'm just going to share 3, and then when John gets to the panel, he'll talk to you more in depth about some of those. So what you see here, this is in Brazil and in Kenya. And in both of those places, we have water storage cisterns, as you can see here in Brazil, and we also do rainwater harvesting. Now, how did we come to that, and why did we come to that? Well, in Brazil, they experience a lot of drought. And so, therefore, it is imperative that water is stored for those drought seasons. And so that's how we got to that particular type of technology in Brazil. We came together with the community, though, to design what does that look like, so that it's easily accessible, so that they don't have to walk long distances to get to the water, and so that everyone knows how to use it. So what I mean by that is we work with the local artisans, we work with the local plumbers, and those who are going to have to maintain these systems and then restore these systems. And we make sure that they have the proper training so that when these events do happen, and they will happen, then there are people there in the community that can restore these systems back to themselves. Again, over here this is Kenya, and in Kenya we have, again, rainwater harvesting as well. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna keep moving. The next slide, this is Bangladesh. So in Bangladesh, what we have learned over time, these are villages that are in prone flood areas. And so what we have learned over time in working with the community, that it makes much more sense actually to do elevated WaSH solutions. So what you see is 2 different elevated WaSH solutions. And we worked with the community in developing these WaSH solutions with this particular community. What these do is they decrease the salt water that is able to get into the water, into the drinking supply. And so therefore that reduces disease. They're also easily accessible for the community. And again, because they are elevated, they're protected from the floods that inevitably will come into the community. So these are two examples in Bangladesh. And then finally, I'm going to move to Kenya and Zambia. One of the things in Kenya is that they have a municipal water and sanitation company that provides water and sanitation to the community, but they only do it on a limited basis. What do I mean by that? They only deliver 1 to 2 days per week. And so what we do is we work with the municipal water supply, with the local community, to extend, to make sure that the community actually has water every day of the week. How do we do that? We actually have microloan programs where individual household owners, actually, they have water tanks at their home. What does that do? That extends the water supply so that then the rest of the people in the community can actually purchase water from that particular homeowner. Also, it becomes a livelihood for that particular household. So those are some of the things that we do in Kenya. We also do rainwater collection. We have rainwater tanks, as you can see as well. And the main thing that I want to emphasize wherever we work is, one, we work with the community. We want to make sure that we have the types of technology that are resilient and sustainable. And that's the biggest thing that I would emphasize. And so therefore that means there has to be people that are local, that understand how to utilize it. They also understanding and working together as to why this is important for their own physical health. So when we think about partners, we do a lot of partnerships in our communities where we're working. So it's not just Habitat there. It could be an NGO that works around health. There could be an NGO that's a school, so that we do school-based water, sanitation, and hygiene. So we come together with the community and with other NGOs, of course with the municipalities and the different entities in government, and that is how we actually come to our solutions in community. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the great presentation. Now we're going into the most exciting part, which is we want to engage with the audience. But to do that, we're going to have some people come on the panel. They'll be in front here as we start to engage, and they'll be the ones to receive the hard questions. So we'll start with having Dr. Eileen, President of Outreach. We'll have Novika from Plan International, she's online. We'll have Dr. Salebu from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And then we also have Dr. John from Habitat for Humanity. Okay, so I think we've had a lot. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the panel, but I will start by something that we've had a lot, and I'll be frank to you, there's a lot going on in the sector about climate change and resilience, and there's a confusion that there is climate change, there is resilience, there's sustainability, and all those terms are being used throughout the sector. Since we have the panel here, I'll start by putting a question towards the panelists, and I think I'll give it to Dr. Salebu to tell us or help us understand better what's the difference between WaSH resilience and sustainability, because there's a lot of confusion, we're getting confused. What is this? Could you help us understand the difference between that?
Of course, thank you, Musa. So when we talk about the future of WaSH,
hear me okay?
Yes, we can
When
hear
we
you.
talk about the future of WaSH, two terms keep coming up, like you say, sustainability and resilience. So just to unpack that these two terms are closely intertwined, they also do complement each other in terms of delivery of WaSH services. But thinking about each of them separately, sustainability would refer to systems that provide services that can be sustained over a long period of time. So think about it in terms of that time frame. You want to sustain ongoing services over the long haul. The goal for sustainability, again, would be to ensure that services are being offered indefinitely over a long period of time. Climate resilience, on the other hand, is not too different. There's just a little bit of nuance. But then climate resilience refers to the ability of a system to survive against any climate shocks, to maintain its own functionality, and also usually just to recover quicker in the face of climate stressors. And for climate stressors, we think about acute, rapid onset types of stressors, such as flooding. We all had the plenary discussion around climate. And we also think about chronic stresses, things that you do not really see immediately, droughts, chronic water scarcity, all of those. But I wanted to take a minute to highlight three core principles that shape the definition of climate resilience. First, let's think about it from a systems approach perspective. So for sanitation services to be delivered successfully, usually we need a lot of actors on board. We think about different system level drivers. We think about infrastructure, people, of course. We think about governance systems and policies. All of those systems, all of those components need to be really playing their role adequately for us to have climate resilient services. The other principle I would like to pass across is the issue of solutions should be local. So like Dr. Musa had set the stage for this session and said that we do experience climate stressors all over the world, but we can only be successful with resilience if we think about strategies at a sub-national level, community level, to go as granular as we can when it comes to strategies and actions on climate resilience. The third principle that we don't always, well, we talk about it, but not as much when we think about climate resilience, is the issue of inclusivity. Who's being impacted, who's being left behind, who does not have the right adaptive capacity, all of those things. So thinking about just how do we want to ensure that people have resilient services across the board over time, I think will be a good piece. So again, just to summarize, thinking about sustainability will be how do we get people services over the long haul? Complement that with climate resilience is how do we get people services that are adaptive in the short term as well as in the long term. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Sarah. At least that helps us understand clearly the difference between resilience and sustainability. But I just want to move very fast, actually, Sarah, to someone else. And one of the things I want to talk about, and I think this goes to Eileen. In your talk, you brought a lot of community work. You showed us some exciting videos about how people have responded to some of these kind of climate shocks and all that. But I have a question. Where do you see the biggest disconnect, if you look at that, between what funders expect and what communities are actually leading in on building this resilience WaSH? Because they are funders and they're funding a lot of projects going on, but we've been seeing communities telling us more about, how they're, what's the disconnect? Can you share with us that in probably a minute?
Yeah, thank you so much, Musa. I think of one big topic, and that is time. I brought it up in my sharing too, and it's two things about time. Time not being enough, and time not being flexible or seen as a flexible thing. We need enough time to build these social infrastructures. Sylvia, you spoke about communities leading their own advocacy, right? That takes time. Raya, you spoke about that research that you did ahead of time and that you continue to do ahead of time to understand community infrastructure, existing community ecosystems. That takes time. And then just to get the capacity strengthening and development happening at a local level, that takes time because we work with people. And at the same time, flexibility. We live in time where there's increasingly more disasters taking place, and that sets us back, right, more often than not. So flexible timing is key. So I'll share that one thing. It's about time, flexibility about time, and having enough time. That's often what
Thank you so much, Elaine. So that takes me back to one of our colleagues from Plan, Indonesia. She really put time to put that recording. She shared a lot of exciting stuff that's going on. And I don't know if, Novika, you can hear us. Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay,
I can
cool,
hear you.
great.
Yeah.
We're still lucky, then we're still fine with technology. So the question I have for you is, you've actually talked about all these kind of things you're doing, and we want to understand what entry points or strategies, given what you've been talking about, for inclusive resilience WaSH that you think have really stood out to you in programming, like you feel like this is really key in what you've been doing, and why do you think so? In a minute or two, can you please tell us what do you think are those strategies that are standing out from the inclusiveness and resilience WaSH programming?
Thank you, Dr. Musa. Our starting point is participation. Everyone needs to be a part of the process, and the community should lead activities on the ground. I think this foundation ensures that vulnerable groups such as women, people with disability, the elderly, youth, or children are not just beneficiaries, but they active participants in program cycle, like from planning and decision making. And from Plan Indonesia's experience, we began strong with a strong WaSH program that emphasizes gender equality and social inclusion. Because of this early work, when community move toward climate resilient, they already understand that adaptation must include everyone. For example, households with pregnant women are more likely to prioritize access to tap water at home. So this helps women avoid unsafe trips to the river and protect their health. So this is also while also building a more resilient community overall. I think that's all, Dr. Musa. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. That's really excellent. And because I've had that, I want to really go to John. John has been working in the sector for long. And I know you've been working in several countries and you've been working on some of these projects. And I wanted to ask you a very quick question. Given your experience and practice, there are quite those kind of practices that are transferable in the Global South. Would you tell us which ones are those that you think we need to adopt locally so that they can actually be implemented to really improve resilience of WaSH in these communities? Do you have those, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, when you look at resilience, and then just as Dr. Levu was talking about sustainability and resilience, sustainability, we are aiming at just a continuous service. Resilience, there's going to be a break at some point, and then for you to recover. And so from the layman's point, while you build committees to work on your systems so that they can function forever, you're dealing with sustainability. But for resilience, our aim is to recover when there's a shock. And for us to look at scalable solutions, you have to work with the communities to identify what the challenges are. And I always say, when you get to the community, ask them, what is it that you face here? And then you ask them maybe some of the available solutions that they have been adopting to, and so on. So I'm using this to just give you two scenarios. In the Pacific Islands of Fiji, for example, we were having a project in the country. Every year they face a lot of cyclones and other disasters. So talking about a resilient structure that would just withstand flooding and so on sometimes can be challenging. If the flood is so high, no matter how you raise the toilet, you cannot have a story building toilet. By the time you climb to the room, probably everything is out already. So we try to build people to put back the situation to wherever it was before the disaster. And that is helping them to have like good plumbers, maybe good masons, good carpenters to put back. So that is one way to get the resilience back. Now, when you come to Africa, I know I'm out for time, but when you come to Africa, the disaster might be different, and you want to look at what the disaster is and how to get the people to be resilient. Probably it might not be a flood area. It might just be the fact that occasionally flood comes in and then goes. And so in that case, you could be looking at scalable solutions like raising the toilet platforms, or maybe the water platforms for you to go in. And these are some of the solutions we have looked at. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. I know there are quite a lot of questions in the audience, and I think that's what we are going to. So I know there's been kind of presentations, and I know there are quite questions. And I think this is the time now to engage with the audience to respond to some of the questions that they may be having to either the presenters or to the panelists. So I think it's the time that we get to have questions from the audience. If there's any question, that would be great, and then we could start engaging that. As the questions come, because I don't see the question yet. Oh, sure, okay. Please, we should use that, yes.
Hello, my name is Lena from Fresh Life. My question would go to one of the organizations. So we've heard from Sylvia about the importance of political incentives and how that directly influences then funding. So I would like to hear from you. Could you share how your organizations have engaged government in this process? What that looked like in practice? What helped to make it effective? But also, can you talk about times when those engagements did not materialize and why?
Thank you. I think that's really a great question. And I think I would want to push this question to Novika. Have you had the question, Novika?
Sorry, Dr. Musa, can you repeat the
yes,
point of
we could have the question repeated. Yes.
Yes, the question was, as we talked about the importance of political incentives and how that relates to funding, could you share about how your organization has engaged with government, how that looks like in practice, what made it effective, and can you also talk about times when those engagements did not materialize?
Have you had the question?
Yeah, I got the point.
Yes.
Maybe I will try to answer this question, but if there are some point from Sylvia or Farunisa, is it okay to add my answer? Yeah, we try to the advocacy process about the climate resilient was from the beginning of the project. So we try to share about the climate resilient was to the government, start from the village level until the district level, and they part of the process of design the climate resilient GETSI, or Gender Equality and Social Inclusion. So I think if we talk about the advocacy process, yeah, it starts from the beginning of project or program. So yeah, they can involve from the starting program, and they can mapping the necessary from the community. And yeah, in Indonesia, we have cycle for budgeting. So I think if we involve the government from the beginning of the project or program, is it like a good opportunity? Because if we talk about the advocacy, it's not a short process, but it's a long process. So yeah, we involve them from the start of program, and we continue to discuss and communication about our progress. And yeah, and also we engage with the community from the diverse group, so they can share about their need, their issue, their rights to advocate to the government. Yeah, I think it's our experience from Plan Indonesia. Thank you, Dr. Musa.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's a really great response. I know we have another question coming up, and I would like to give Eileen 30 seconds to supplement some of the question where you think things have not worked, because I know in the Philippines you work closely with the government, and there are times when things have not worked. Could you share with us some of those where things have not worked and they have worked?
Yep, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. Where we have experienced government not stepping in and not supporting local communities, it's when they don't see evidence. Number one. And number two, and I sound like a broken record, if communities are not organized. So if communities are organized, if they have leadership structures that their evidence is present, when they have bank accounts, when they have financial systems and that capacity strengthened, then governments are far more likely at a very local level to support those groups in their initiatives. And then second of all, if they don't have the evidence of success of previous interventions, they are more, they're more less likely to support them. And so what we do at our level is we support communities in building that capacity so that they, at a local level, collect data, evidence around storytelling, so that they can then advocate for themselves at government to show, if you invest in us as a community group, this is what you will get. So I twisted it a little bit there.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. That's great. So we have another question, please.
Hi, my name is Maureen from Uganda. So when we started talking about climate and health and WaSH, we realized that we had to do a whole integration into the entire system. So at community level, at government level, at health facilities, everywhere, we found that we had to integrate climate resilience everywhere. But it's a big ask. It's so resource constraining. And so my question to this room is, where do we start? Where is the best place to start? And what does success look like? Yeah, thank you.
Excellent question. Thank you so much. That's a great question. And I think I would love John to take on that within a minute to try to respond to that.
Okay. So you are right. Climate change cuts across so many places. And my experience, we worked in a country, maybe, I don't know whether I should mention the country or not, but we use the PASA approach. PASA is participatory approach to safe shelter. And we try to talk with the community to find out what their needs were. And then they told us every single thing that was a problem to them. Then at the end of the day, they prioritized. When they prioritized, WaSH came at the top. So we had to work with them from the WaSH end, but dealing with the climate together. If they had said health was first, we would go in with partners in the health sector, and then we put climate. So sometimes our assessments have to, facilitate the communities to prioritize. And then with our knowledge, we can facilitate them. Just like my sister Jane said, we are not there to teach them, but we're just there to partner and collaborate and facilitate them to take a direction that we can help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. I think I would also want Sarah can add on in just 30 seconds to add on what John said.
Of course, thank you for your question. Some of the most successful models I've seen around sort of increasing resilience at a community level involve imparting knowledge, really. And that's just imparting knowledge at the local level. I've seen some groups make really good guidelines around how to train local masons on how to use local materials to make facilities more resilient. And I do acknowledge that there's fatigue when you ask a community on day one to upgrade their latrine so that it's resilient. Go back for another 5 years, tell them to make more upgrades. There's issues of, they get tired, it's not affordable. So thinking about using local materials, just local expertise, I think is something that I've seen successfully being done in the field, and I will recommend that.
Thank you. I think we have another question, please.
Hi, thank you for a really insightful session and panel so far. My question may be a bit more technical, but in the spirit of sort of co-development with community leaders, community members, I'm curious what sort of activities, workshops, sort of technical exercises, listening forums have been the most practical in terms of conducting within a community setting, and also generating the most information for any toolkits that your teams are putting together. So a little bit more concretely, like, some of your experiences in terms of the most useful ways to engage with community members and leaders. Thank you.
Excellent. That's a great question. I think I'm going to push this question to Elaine to really start on this, because we've worked closely in the Philippines, and these are kind of things we've been looking at. Please.
Wonderful question. Wonderful question. So we have a whole process, a 9-step process, and I'll be very happy to share that with you later. So, because it's going to take a minute or more to get into that. But we found that community meetings are great, depending on the context. So if your practitioners and facilitators are skilled and they know their context really, really well, they will understand, okay, we need to have separate meetings for women versus men, for younger, for older people, to ensure inclusivity, right? But bottom line, collective meetings are fantastic, but they need to be preceded by intensive trust-building exercises. And that's the facilitator going, and Praya mentioned it too, going one by one households first, and building trust and understanding where the power dynamics lie within communities before you can even think about having an inclusive meeting. And I would say that is one tactic, right, of one-on-one conversations, practitioners going house to house, and understanding and learning from people, understanding the context in a very, very deep level. And that is where you then understand, okay, what's the next approach are we going to take? Are we doing small groups? Are we doing, location meetings? Are we doing a grand, large-scale meetings? Do we separate people out? That kind of thing. But I'll be happy to share more about our practice afterward. Great, thank you for that question.
Good, thank you so much, Elaine. I think we have another question, please. As we're getting the other question, so please, you could scan and try to respond to that, because then we're trying to see exactly how to respond on this inclusiveness. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining this very great panels. So my name is Muhammad Azhar. I'm one of the students in the UNC Gillings Public School. So I just wondering, maybe the questions will be delivered especially for Dr. John, and also some of the NGOs that are working together with this climate resilience. But the question is, so I attend the morning meetings, right? So just in this room with the Dr. Darren and Dr. Barbara Evans about her work and in the big consortium, including with WHO and some universities in the UK, also Australia, right? about how to monitor indicator monitoring climate resilience and WaSH globally, right? And then I came to this panel, right? Maybe some of the participants also already notes that our discussion this morning. So the question is there an indicators specifically to monitor how vulnerable communities in small islands, right? Because mostly from the 600 indicators that we discussed this morning with Dr. Barbara Evans and Dr. Darren, I think nothing. I didn't find any co-founding variables that can monitor WaSH in the rural area, as Dr. John told just now in Fiji, right? Because a lot of populations are living in small islands, as well as in Maldives, Indonesia, Philippines. We are really vulnerable when the cyclone comes and monsoon this month, actually, right? October, November, December. And then we cannot, pooping because the sea level rising, right? Because the rising temperature and also the cyclone. So maybe Dr. John and your teamwork can deliver message to the teamwork with WHO and Dr. Barbara Evans to include this indicator to monitor WaSH and climate resilience for special community, right? It's like in the small islands. So I think that's only my questions. Is there any indicators?
Right, thank you so much. Great question. John, do you want to respond to that in 30 seconds?
Yeah, I think I would want to leave this back to the group because they are working as a technical group. So I'm not actually supposed to interfere in whatever they do. But what we work on the field and we realize is that there's a certain level of disasters that no matter how resilient you are, you cannot be resilient. So for example, last year there was a disaster in North Carolina here. How could any of those communities be resilient when you are having water rising up to maybe 6 meters high? It's not resilient. But I also think that having, let's say, a number of plumbers existing in the community after you have trained them, and then there's a disaster and those people are capable of going back, can be a measure of the community's ability to get back to their original state. But let me leave this for now to the indicator group, and probably we'll wait for what they direct the sector to go.
Good. Thank you, John. I think we have another question. Yes.
Hello, this is Hamali Oza from University of Richmond. It wasn't a question, if that's okay.
Yes.
It was more of a comment to the previous question with, I guess, response to some work that we've been doing in Fiji with the revitalizing informal settlements and their environment study, where we are trying to measure resilience in Fiji and Indonesia. So we're developing some measurement scales that I'm happy to share with you if you're interested. It's not exactly WaSH indicators specifically, but I'm happy to talk more about it. Do we have time?
Yes, I think we have time for one question. So.
Something that I have more recently got into the space of climate resilience, something that I struggle with is being resilient doesn't like in the moment, it doesn't feel good, I think I struggle with this concept of resilience because what if what we're actually capturing is survival and not necessarily resilience? And I know this is an extremely vague question, but in your experiences, have you come across instances in your work where you're like, hey, actually these communities this is not resilience, this is maybe maladaptation or really survival. What do we do here? Where do we find the spot to intervene so that they're not on this constant, cusp of trying to just survive, but are actually able to then move, tapping into that transformative capacity. So not even just absorptive, adaptive, but that transformative capacity to move past maladaptation and survival into maybe even thriving. I'm curious if you all have experienced that in your work at all.
Yes, great. I think I want to start with Sarah to really respond to that, and then I'll give 30 seconds to John and Eileen, still 30 seconds to respond to that.
Of course, thank you for that great question. In the communities that I've worked with, I've seen a range of coping mechanisms, really. That's how I think about survival. So things like communities get displaced, they find somewhere else to go. Or I do not have access to my sanitation facility, therefore I use my neighbors. So those to me sort of fit within that definition of survival. But I think the difference for me would be to have communities be resilient instead of being in survival mode would be to ensure that once there's a climate shock, their lives are not disrupted in a significant way. Like, granted, John did say shocks will happen. We expect that, but can we not have their lives disrupted in a big way? So I think some of the climate resilient adaptation strategies that are in place, think about engineered strategies like, raise a latrine, or could be more operational management type of practices like clear your open drain, for example, so that it allows the storm water to run through, things like that, I think would sort of minimize that level of disruption. Thank you.
Maybe for me, what I will add to what Dr. Lebo has just said is working with the community to identify what are actually the challenges that they know of. So for example, they can be in a survival mode if, for example, the place is a flat and they need to move to a higher ground, then there can be a central point for everyone to get there, but that is just a temporary one. They would want to get back to their original lives. And so adaptation would now come in. If we know of the problem and we say we can plan ahead and put these structures in place so that when there's an issue, they would be able to adjust and survive. Thank you.
Yes, Eileen, 30 seconds.
I'm going to be a little sneaky and I'm going to go back to your comment. And I would be curious if social capital is an indicator of resilience.
So we have 3 domains that we developed. This was part of my PhD work at Emory. So we have a social resilience scale, and then an economic scale, and an environmental scale. We're currently, so it's a published paper, and we're currently revamping the econ and the environmental, but the social is internally validated in Fiji and Indonesia.
Fantastic, fantastic.
So excited to hear you.
Yes, fantastic. And then just quickly, Musa, I think in response to the survival, a very good point that you're making, it's building, transforming communities to a space of them thriving when times are okay. So that when the bad times come, they are ready, because when they are ready, then I think it's more look at us, we are acting, rather than look at us, we are surviving, So drawing on what they have.
Good. I think we have just 3 minutes, and I want to use the 3 minutes efficiently. And this time I want to be very strict. I'm only giving you 20 seconds, each of you, to summarize. And what I want you to tell me is, if you could recommend or give a recommendation to a donor, what practical recommendation, would you say to a decision maker or donor that could improve climate resilience in WaSH? Just within 30 seconds. You can even use one word if you can.
Community-led development.
Good.
Government support.
Good.
Invest in local knowledge.
Excellent. Novika, can you hear us? Have you had the question?
Yeah. Yeah. I think invest in community leadership and inclusion from the very beginning.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, the great panel, for all that kind of things. And thank you so much, all people who have done our survey. I think we just have 1 minute, but all what we need to take away from this session is community leadership and inclusiveness of community in making decisions, identify these problems to improve resilience WaSH in rural communities. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much. Yeah, congratulations.